This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guests only. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Welcome to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces, a podcast devoted to changing the way eating disorders and mental illness are viewed in our society. With your hosts, Jack and Linda Major and Ellen Bennett. Today's guest is Barbara Rarrick. Barbara has lived all her life in the Rochester area and has a lake house on Keuka Lake. She raised 3 daughters, one who was diagnosed with anorexia at age 11 in 1969. At age 88, Barbara has experienced the impact of alcoholism, mental health issues, and anorexia bulimia, starting when her youngest daughter was 5 years old, all during a time when no one was talking about any of it. Barbara's youngest daughter was exhibiting behaviors that seemed very different from her other daughters. She consulted their doctor. This was the beginning of a lifetime of struggles. At this time, she also shared her concerns about her oldest daughter's loss of weight, change in mood, and refusal to eat. The doctor told her to not delay, to take care of it right away. This was to be a journey that she knew nothing about. She and her husband were scared and felt very alone. Their daughter did recover. What is fascinating is they consulted a psychiatrist who took the lead and supported this family. 30 years later, this might not have been the case. Fast forward to today, where psychiatry is beginning to become much more involved in treatment and diagnosis.
Welcome, everyone, to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces, episode 129. In the 1960s and 70s, not many people were talking about eating disorders. They were viewed as a choice of young, beautiful girls wanting to be thin. In 1983, when superstar Karen Carpenter died due to the damaging effects of years of struggling with an eating disorder, people began to open up, but in reality, the silence continued, allowing eating disorders to thrive. Today, we will take a look at what a diagnosis of anorexia looked like in the late 1960s and a family's journey at a time when few doctors were knowledgeable about eating disorders. We will also discuss the past 50 years and where we are today with the treatment for eating disorders. Today's podcast is brought to you by 2 wonderful nonprofits helping people with eating disorders and families. The Emily Connection, EMILEE, and KMB for Answers. I'd like to welcome my co-hosts, my husband, my roommate, and best friend, Jack Major, and our dear friend and fellow advocate and mental health advocate, Ms. Ellen Bennett.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks. It's great to be back with you and Ellen, and our special guest today, Barbara. And just
Hello. It's great to be here. Welcome, listeners.
And welcome, Barbara. We're thrilled to have you today. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And I'm so glad that you and Ellen have become a very special connection.
Thank you. I'm glad to be a part of this journey, or as Ellen would say, this adventure together of learning from past and the present.
Thank you,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. This, it's an amazing conversation, and I just can't wait. So here we go. I met Barbara a little over a year ago when I stayed with her at her lake house for a few weeks. We became fast friends and continue to meet for lunch on a regular basis to stay connected. We are honored to have you join us today. You have such a unique perspective. We have a lot to unpack, looking across 50 years of eating disorders, treatment, and the impact on families and loved ones. So much has happened in the past 50 years. In the past 10 years, we've seen many positive changes, but there is so much more that needs to happen, and that's why we're here. with this podcast.
Absolutely.
Because mental health diagnoses continue to increase, and we are seeing younger and younger children impacted. So let's get started.
Once again, welcome, Barbara. Thank you for being with us today.
Yes, we're very excited. Ellen, why don't you start with the first question?
Okay. When we first met, we realized we both had daughters who were diagnosed with anorexia at age 11. It was really quite a moment for me because the impact of thinking Katie was diagnosed in 1999 and Barb's daughter was diagnosed in 1968, over a 30-year difference in time. I knew my struggles from 30 years ago, thinking about what was happening with Barb's situation in 1968. I needed to know more. So, Barb, if you will share with us aspects of your experience in the late 60s when your daughter was first diagnosed.
Well, it was a very scary time for me. We knew nothing about anorexia, didn't even know what the word meant. I had to look it up to find out what might be going on with my daughter. It was a very emotional time because things were so up and down with Darlene, and she didn't know what was going on, and we didn't. So it was just a time of anxiety and hopeful learning from someone.
Barbara, can you tell us when you first realized that something wasn't right with your daughter?
Yes, I noticed she wasn't eating very much, and then she started to lose weight, and we thought something was wrong with her stomach or something, and we took her to a doctor, our primary care doctor, and he suggested that we get in touch with Ben. He was the only really known doctor who dealt with anorexia. And so he sent us to Dr. Miller, who started out with Darlene. And it was a very scary time for all of us.
Was Dr. Miller able to help her?
Yes. Yeah. She, of course, hated him. But,
yeah, of course.
We don't like anybody that tells us things that are happening to us that we don't like and we don't understand. Yeah, he was the best of the best at the time, and he used Darlene for a case study. He told us, and after every time that he would meet with her, he would meet with us afterwards to tell us what was going on with why he was doing certain things, and that was very helpful. He shared what he knew, and he suggested that yeah, she went to the hospital for evaluation, and what she did, she went to Strong and was there for a couple of weeks, and they monitored her going to the bathroom, eating, everything. And after that, they sent her to our wing, which is the where they went for people with emotional problems. And she was there for, I can't remember how long. It just seemed like maybe 6 weeks. And we weren't allowed to go in and see her for the first week. They wanted her to get assimilated into the program that they had planned for her. They did a lot of things, counseling with her. She became friends with a couple of people there, and that helped a little bit. So she, after she got out of the hospital, I think that was a catalyst for getting her on her way to recovery.
You know, I think people don't realize that eating disorders have been going on since probably the beginning of time. There was a book called Holy Anorexia that says, you know, that told about what they believe many of the saints who started out fasting developed anorexia. So it's just really interesting how it's been under the radar for so long, and how wonderful that you found a doctor who was open to helping your daughter, and, you know, and being such an essential part of her treatment and her recovery.
Well, and understanding early on that she needed to get that help and that treatment and go to the hospital.
That's always a blessing, but it's probably was even more of a blessing back then.
Yeah. What year was that?
I found it fascinating that the first line of defense was to see a psychiatrist. And the fact that the pediatrician at that time knew to do that. And this was in Rochester. So all of the factors that play into this, are intriguing.
Absolutely.
Both of our daughters, Ellen and my daughter, Darlene, they're both 11 when this began. And we immediately bonded when we found out that our daughters had this illness at such a young age. And we're very fortunate to have a really good doctor. That was a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked a little bit about the doctor, and it's like the luck of the draw. You were lucky is basically my only response. You were so lucky, because I think back in 1999, 11 was very young. I was told it was atypical. So 30 years before that, that was really out of the box. I'm curious, did friends, did family understand what was going on with your daughter? Did you have any support?
No. Everyone was just as unknowledgeable, for a better word, as we were, nobody knew that much about anorexia, and so they were supportive in that, they were commiserating with our concern, our worry, the heartache of it all. No, the family didn't really understand it. They didn't know how to act with her, how to treat her. We didn't either. It was just a trial and error kind of situation. And we did what the doctor suggested and certain things, and that helped.
That time period, nobody was talking about mental health. I know I felt isolated, and I'm sure you were extremely isolated.
Yes. Yes, I was, and it was very scary. My daughters were confused. I had two younger daughters, and they were scared. They didn't know what was happening either. So it was just a very frightening time for all of us who loved Darlene and wanted help for her right away. And nothing happened very quickly. It wasn't like she had flu or something and it would be over with. So we thought it would be over with maybe a year or something. We didn't think it would be years, but it would go on. But it did, as it seems to in most cases. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Barbara, did it impact her schooling? Was she able to continue going to school on a regular basis?
She was an excellent student, and so that carried her through. She was very controlled in everything that she did, her writing and everything. She did have her artwork that she was very artistic. That helped her, I know. Her friends didn't understand either. So, like all things, when teenagers don't understand something, they stay away from it. So they stayed away from Darlene and isolated her even more.
Oh, that had to hurt her. I mean, those connections are so important to have. Did they suggest a dietitian?
Yes, they did. She did have one when she was in the hospital. That was helpful. But the dietitian gave good suggestions on what to do and how to eat and how to do certain things to keep yourself strong enough. But she was so enmeshed in this illness that she was purging and she was on the cusp of bulimia as well. So she ate when she was around us. She would eat well, but then through laxatives and other self-induced ways of vomiting and whatnot, that just sort of blew all good intentions away. And I guess that's a part of anorexia that is often happening with other young people. And we didn't know what to do about it.
Barb, how did you discover that she was purging?
I didn't. And I didn't know until later on.
Mm-hmm.
Her sisters told me that they knew, but they didn't say anything to me. And it was sort of a sisterhood secret kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I learned about that later. And I also found when I was putting things away in her closet, there was a box in the back of the closet. And in that box was boxes and boxes and boxes of laxatives. Oh. And that just scared me to pieces because I realized, I guess, the enormity, the seriousness of this illness was just beyond anything that we could control.
It's such a serious, life-threatening illness, and it makes it even harder for the patient and families to deal with when there's so few safe places to talk about what's going on in their heads and what's going on for families. And the people who have anorexia are very secretive about behaviors, and their eating disorder becomes their best friend, and they'll protect it because it makes them feel better. And it's really hard for people who haven't experienced this on some level to understand that it's just a way of dealing with emotions. And people have genetic traits they know now that they're predisposed, but not everybody who has these traits, which are, good traits like, being driven and perfectionistic, sometimes waiting, black thinking, which can be very good things, but that's not what causes it. It's something that happens in someone's life that is upsetting to them. It can be a transition. It could be something to somebody else that seems very small, but it's just hard for people to wrap their heads around. And I wonder if when you think back now, I mean, I'm sure you all did the best you could, and, there was recovery, and that was wonderful. I know it was a long time coming, but what do you wish you knew then? And what are the most important things that this has taught you?
Well, I wish I knew then about anorexia, but you can only absorb so much when you're emotionally upset. And I think we dealt with it the best we knew how. I wish today that everybody could have doctors who help people with anorexia and bulimia. And I know we're working on it, and I know it's getting better. And that makes me feel very good. I just have lots of memories of things that were so hard. Traveling with her when we went to Florida was difficult because there again, eating was what you do on vacation, and you're all together, so you see it even more. So we had lots of discussions and fights about eating, and so it's a journey. We knew too that at the time that she didn't get her period until she was 14, 15, and certain things like that were so telling, but we didn't know it for sure.
Well, you did the best you could with the information you had at the time, and thank goodness that things worked out, and that your doctor getting things going, and the psychiatrist that was involved, that was amazing for that time, really.
Interesting comparison that the psychiatrist would have been the only counseling, mental health type of support that would have been available. It's not like now when we have our network of mental health counselors and things like that. I the isolation. And again, I think of when you're traveling, at least somebody kind of gave me some kind of advice. No, I didn't have any advice. I learned it I lived it, I learned it, and I was like, oh, vacations are challenging. We may have to put those on the back burner for a while. And when I reflect, it's like, oh my gosh, you had nothing. There was nothing. So we're moving ahead, thankfully. In 1999, parents were not included in the recovery process. That was the time period of the parentectomy, where parents were almost the cause. Matter of fact, we were almost blamed. So that was a dark time period. I'll never forget Katie being sent home at age 11 after being in the hospital for 4 weeks. And she was responsible for her meal plan. I was not to provide support. That was her job. 11. It didn't work. If anybody needs a spoiler alert, that did not work. And I had to, when they said she had to go back to residential, I had to advocate for, give me something else to try. Let me. And basically that opened a window for me to be more involved and directly helping and supporting meals. And it made all the difference in the world. Barb, do you feel that you were included in treatment for your daughter?
For the most part, yes. Well, there were times when she was away in the hospital and under treatment that, we felt isolated because we couldn't be there with her and she couldn't share that much. She was very closed about what she was learning in the hospital. So we just learned through what the doctors could tell us that was happening and whatnot. And so as far as the dietitian go, couldn't work the program with a dietitian, but if things are happening that she's eating and then purging, then it doesn't matter whether you have the best dietitian in the world. It just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard for them to find the motivation, but those professional people and the support and the love, I think, are the things that can help people start to turn the corner and find success in the little steps, and then it can build from there. But I think it's had to be so difficult on all of you, and I'm just so glad that there was the best outcome.
Barbara, do you know when she was in the what I guess they called our wing back then? Were there other girls or any men or boys in there that had eating disorders?
Yes, there were other girls around her age, and there was one boy that I remember, and I thought it was strange. I thought it was mostly illness for young women, and I didn't realize it happened to men as well, but it does, and it did, and it still does. She made some friends, which helped her, and she did talk about that and their friendship, and I was glad for that.
Yeah, it's strange. You say that, back in 1999, you didn't know it happened to boys. And I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday and talked about a young man who was in our support group who now has got a job again. And, he's back hopefully on a good path in his recovery. And the person looked at me and said, So this happens to males too. So it's we've got a long way to go to educate the public about the seriousness and how this illness doesn't discriminate. So.
They say that some of the statistics are anywhere from 20 to 30% are male.
Throwing my money on higher. We're not even remotely close. I think when it all shakes out when we have some really solid data, it's going to be 35 to 45%.
Well, the data is so old for all of this that I think all the numbers are very skewed and very low.
The 30 million has been there for how long?
20 years.
It affects up to 30 million.
Yeah. It's a revolving
and so.
Data.
So, Barbara, we're so happy that your daughter is in recovery. Does she still have any symptoms of struggling?
Yes, I think like any mental illness, you can be so-called quote-unquote cured, but the thoughts are still in your head. And when Darlene was going through this, she had to exercise a lot, walk a lot, and swim. Any form of exercise was a must. And I see that today, even that she has to walk every day. She walks sometimes 6 miles a day, but she has to walk every day. She looks wonderful. She's a wife and a mother and a grandmother and has a thriving art studio for little ones. And she's very happy and she looks wonderful. But there's still the little in the head that says, "Oh, I have to walk. I have to exercise every day."
Well, everybody's recovery looks different, and she probably, people who really thrive on exercise have anxiety, and that helps relieve that. But it's all about finding the balance. But if she's been well enough to have a family and a job and not be in the hospital, she's living her own recovery. And yeah, I'm sure for a lot of people, the voices are still there, but they don't rule all the time.
Exactly.
Our journey with Emily, and I'm sure Ellen has those memories too of that, those unbelievable things that happened that you just stood there and shook your head and said, this can't be happening. Why is this happening? And is there any moment that stands out more to you? And again, if you don't want to answer, that's fine. I don't want to bring up bad memories, but
just the memory that now I'm thinking how we thought we were doing everything possible at the time, but her girls were suffering. The other two, my other two daughters, and that makes me sad today to think that they were missing Mom and Dad because we were so busy with learning about Darlene's illness that we weren't there for them. But there were times when things were so tense that some of those memories you want to just say, okay, they were bad at the time. Did I learn from that bad experience? Yes, hopefully I did. And that's where I am today, is that I'm still learning about it and still thankful, so very thankful that we surprisingly had the care we did for her, and that she is thriving and doing well today. And for that, I have many blessings.
Well, you're very, very strong and very brave. And obviously, you're a very wonderful mom, and your children are also lucky to have you as their mom. There's positive changes that have happened since then. We still have a long way to go, but I think the fact that we can have conversations like this is monumental. That, well, when we talk to somebody and somebody asks us about our journey or our story, or it comes up, somebody who we is an acquaintance or we don't know, almost everybody says they know somebody in their family, or they mention a friend or somebody that they're worried about. So I think the more that we can do that, the more that's going to bring about the awareness and the changes that need to happen. People are being diagnosed early. They need to be diagnosed even earlier, but at least doctors and clinicians are becoming more aware. They need much more education, but it's starting to happen. It can't happen fast enough. The sooner that people get treated, the more likely they are to find some level of recovery and hopefully full recovery. But it's nobody's fault, and families and loved ones can be the best allies in treatment, but it takes a village ultimately. What would you say, Alan and Jack, to the things that need to happen?
Education of the community, because as you say, Linda, when people get out of treatment,
it's when the rubber hits
the road, and they need connections from so many different, whether it's family, friends, the medical community, it takes a village. Certainly is comes into play here with all mental illnesses, and these people need to know that they're not alone, and they need that peer support from people that are going through it or have gone through it, or in their own recovery. So
it's so important for people to be seen outside of the disease too, and not talk about it all the time. To just assimilate into some sort of normal life sometimes, and hopefully that will happen more and more. But yeah, I definitely agree. What about you, Alan?
It's that education and understanding before you're in it, when you're in it. I'm always, when I reflect back, the majority of what I now know, I learned after, and so it's what is happening now is so important to have these conversations. And thankfully we have so many ways to get information out. So people are much more educated. And we just have to keep that stream going for information and education, because that's how early intervention is going to happen. If people are aware when they tune into the signs and they know what next steps are doing, that it really is something. It's, if you think something's wrong, check it out. I think that's becoming more and more important to all of us and across all aspects of our lives. Yeah.
And I think that it's very interesting that Jack and I and you, Alan, and you, Barbara, that we all learned so much more when we were living with it.
And after the fact.
And, I'm sure that you guys that you wonderful people, I should not say you guys, tried to get your hands on everything you could as far as information and books and treatment. But you're in the throes of trying to save the life of someone you love more than life itself, of your child. And you also have children and demands of life and have to work. And it's almost impossible to just totally learn what you have to learn just by reading books or listening to articles or talking to people. It just, you have to kind of live it. And I think we all wish we could have learned what we've learned now sooner. Certainly might have made a difference. But we've learned so much even afterwards, because there's more and more evidence that comes out that it's certainly not a choice and it's nobody's fault. And it changes brains, and brains shrink when people have anorexia. It doesn't mean that they can't be restored, but when they're in the throes of an eating disorder, it's very hard for them to get outside of their own heads. And I don't think we really realize that to the extent that they were in their own heads thinking about food or not eating or whatever the eating disorder is. It just takes up so much of that brain space, and it robs people from the quality of their other relationships. And it's really sad. It really hijacks the life. So it's so important we're having these conversations. We don't want anybody else to go through what all of us on this Zoom have gone through. No patient, no parent, no family member, no friend.
Absolutely. And the upside is that what we've seen in the past I've seen change happen in 10 years, and in the last 5 years, the things that are changing, the conversations that are happening, the research is exponential. And I expect that to continue. And that inspires all of us to keep doing what we're doing, keep having those conversations, and change is coming, because we want everyone to have access to treatment, and we want early intervention to be the norm. That's what happens.
And Ellen, you know me, what I think needs to happen yesterday, and certainly the sooner the better, is for the insurance industry to...
Hey, they're starting to talk about it more frequently, Jack.
Yeah, the insurance industry to get on board.
Let's get it out.
Yep. So.
Oh, that's vital. Vital. It's not a choice. Everybody's mental health matters, and there's no health without mental health, right?
God. And the brain happens to be connected to the body.
Yeah.
Every organ. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and it's so important that conversation's coming to the surface.
This has been wonderful.
This has been wonderful, Barbara. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. That's welcome. Good to be a part of such a wonderful educational time for you to share all of this with others, for us all, for all of us to share.
Thank you very much.
Well, I thank you for letting me be here.
Oh my gosh.
It's our pleasure and our honor.
Your wisdom and your insights are something that we can certainly relate to. And I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast will be able to resonate with so many of the things that you've said, even so many years later.
So this podcast would not be happening without the great sound engineer, Scott Fitzgerald of Rockbox Recording and Production, who expertly puts up with us and produces our podcast and is so much more.
Help us continue the conversations. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe to Once Shattered on the podcast platform that you are listening to us on.
Remember, Rockbox is the place to record your podcast, record your audiobook, or do a legacy cast for your loved ones. Thank you, everyone, for listening.